Joining me in another episode in our study of the Sermon on the Mount. In today's study, we're going to look at Matthew chapter 7, verses 7 through 12, with an emphasis on verse 12, where Jesus teaches about the golden rule. So let's go ahead and read verses 7 to 12. Ask, and it shall be given to you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened to you. For everyone that asks receives, and he that seeks finds. And to him that knocks it shall be opened. Or what man is there of you, whom if his son ask for bread, will he give him a stone? Or if he ask for a fish, will he give him a serpent? If you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more shall your Father which is in heaven give good things to them that ask him? Therefore, all things whatsoever you would that men do to you, do ye even so to them. For this is the law and the prophets. In Matthew chapter 7, in the first 12 verses, they're all connected together. While each of the teachings Jesus gives has a certain independence, they're connected together. So let's see how all of this works. In the beginning of Matthew chapter 7, Jesus warns about passing self-righteous, harsh, hypocritical judgment against those who are in sin. Then he goes on and gives this strange saying about giving that which is holy to dogs or casting our pearls before swine. We're not supposed to do that. And then he describes people who are asking, who are seeking, who are knocking. And then he makes the point in verse 12. Therefore, treat people how you would want to be treated. In each of these situations, Jesus is describing scenarios in which we will likely find ourselves as we are seeking to advance the kingdom in the hearts and minds of other people. How are we supposed to respond and react in these different situations? How are we supposed to react when we come across someone who is struggling in sin? Should we be unkind to them? Should we kick them when they're down? Should we use them as an opportunity to elevate our morality and ethics? Or should we treat them how we would want to be treated? With kindness and understanding, with love, and seeking to restore them? How should we treat someone who is adamantly opposed to the gospel, as Jesus describes in verse 6? Should we continue to just endlessly argue and engage them? Well, if we were adamantly opposed to the gospel, we probably would just want to be left alone. So that's perhaps how we should approach such people. What about people who are seeking, who are genuinely searching for the kingdom? People who are like the kind of people Jesus describes in the beginning of the sermon, those who are poor in spirit. Well, we should, with patience and tenderness, take time with them to lead them to the kingdom, to share with them their Savior so that they could be renewed and restored and added to this great kingdom. The golden rule of Matthew 7 and verse 12, treating other people in the way that we would want to be treated, that is the heart of it all. Jesus says as much in that passage. He says that this rule, this standard, this moral and ethical principle of love represents the foundation of the law and prophets. So consider some examples of that, how love was the foundation of the law and prophets. In Leviticus chapter 19, you can look at that chapter and notice some of the detailed rules and regulations that the law of Moses prescribed. In chapter 19, injustice, impartiality, for example, are condemned. And there's a reason why injustice and partiality are condemned. They are condemned on the basis of loving our neighbor as ourselves. We wouldn't want to be treated unjustly. We wouldn't want to be treated through partiality. Therefore, we should not treat other people in such a fashion. In verses 33 and 34, the law deals with how Israel was to treat strangers and foreigners, people who from other nations who would come and maybe just pass through traveling into Israel, or maybe we would be dealing with immigrants here. How were they to be treated? Well, they were to treat the foreigners like they would want to be treated. After all, the law says, you were once strangers and foreigners in the land of Egypt. In Jeremiah chapter 9, one of the major prophets in the history of Israel and part of the Old Testament, there Jeremiah talks about in chapters 9 and verses 23 and 24 how the Lord delights. He delights in steadfast love, justice, and righteousness. You'll find that kind of language used frequently in the prophets, mainly because when the prophets were doing their work is when Israel and Judah had become very unjust in their treatment of each other. So love is the foundation of Israel's relationship with God. And as far as Jesus is concerned, that has not changed. The foundation of our relationship with God is love. It always has been and it always will be. However, because of pride and selfishness, we often ignore that and dismiss the kind of self-giving love which would lead us to treat other people how we would want to be treated, with kindness, love, dignity, and respect. That is the way God has always expected and will always expect us to treat our fellow man. After all, we've all been created in the image of God, and therefore we owe love to one another as a result of that very basic understanding of our origin. Now, the golden rule is very simple. As a matter of fact, it is probably the shortest commentary on the old law you will find anywhere. Volumes and volumes and volumes of books have been written in commentary of the law of Moses. That certainly was true by the time Jesus came on the scene. It is certainly true today. Matthew 7:12 is an example where Jesus just very succinctly states what the law and prophets were all about, what they were trying to convey, how it was trying to shape Israel's hearts and minds that they would learn to treat one another with love, the same kind of love that God had treated them with. But it is simple. It is a simple teaching. It is so simple we will use it to teach our children as a basic way to convey to them how they're supposed to interact with other people. We teach them how they're to treat each other, how they would want to be treated. It's profound, though. As simple as it is, as short and succinct as this saying is, it's profound, mainly due to the transforming consequences of its implementation. This short teaching will transform every human interaction we have, every relationship. It will change it. It will profoundly change a marriage. Matter of fact, Paul will use the golden rule in some of the things that he states towards how husbands are to treat their wives as they would treat themselves. That's not Paul inventing something. That's Paul drawing on this important teaching of Jesus. It'll change marriage. It'll change family life. It'll change the way we parent our children. It will change the way we just go grocery shopping and deal with people that we interact with in very trivial settings. But this is the way we become lights of the world. This is how we reflect the glory of God, by treating our fellow man with dignity, respect, and love. So, in conclusion, as simple as this rule is to understand, it is deeply challenging. Often we treat others in a very self-serving way. We will do harm to each other as a means to protect ourselves or to advance ourselves. The question we would be wise to ask ourselves is, do we have enough faith in this rule? Do we trust it? Are we so willing to use this as our basis for interaction with other people? Sometimes we're not as trusting as we need to be. We don't have faith enough in the message that Jesus brings. If that's the case, then we need to ask the Lord to increase our faith, that we might trust it as we go about to interact with other people. But also remember this. Remember what Jesus says in Matthew 7 in verse 2, the way we treat other people, the judgment that we use to treat other people will be the same judgment that is turned on us. Jesus uses the golden rule as a way to convey the consequence, the personal consequence regarding how we have treated other people in this life. So do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Well, thank you for joining me today. I hope the study's been helpful, and I look forward to being with you next time as we begin to look at Matthew chapter 7 and verses 13 and 14. Thank you, and have a nice day.